Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the Senate map and my updated prediction since it's the start of the month, and I figured now that it's September and now that we are well into election season, we're, kind of at the home stretch, arguably we're at, I guess you could say crunch time. We'll be doing these every 2 weeks. So usually we do these monthly or, every 5 weeks. It's now that time of year where we're doing them every 2 weeks, so that's pretty exciting. I think for me, it gives me flashbacks to 2020 where everything was changing so quickly. We had Senate races that we got new polls every day. Basically, what you'd see is uh, 1 week you do a Senate prediction, then you have to do another one in like another 8 or 9 days because so much had changed. And so I think this cycle there are less contested races, but the contested races we have are just so close that I don't. It's going to be very hard, and a lot's going to change, and the slightest thing could really get me to change my mind. So with that being said, let's just get right into it here and let's talk about where the Senate elections are, where I stand on them as of today. So before we do that, let's look at our baselines here. So right now, the Democratic Party leads the generic ballot on 538 by about 0.9%, and you can take like I've heard both Democrats and Republicans giving positive spin on this. Like, the Democrats are saying, "Oh well, look, we were down 2.5 in the spring and early parts of summer. Now I've got a lead of about 0.9%." And yeah, that's true. And they've gained momentum, but certainly it's momentum that they have to hold on to if they want to hold on to the Senate and be competitive to the House. I'll say that. And then for the Republicans, I think a lot of Republicans are saying, "Oh well, in 2020, the national polls underestimated Trump and the GOP by 2-3%, and if the Democrats are only up by one nationally, then they're probably losing by a couple of points." And you can make that argument, but in 2018, the generic ballot polls in 538 were spot on. They had the Democrats winning by 8.6. I think that's exactly the amount they won by. And in midterms, the polls are generally just better. Now, there are some polls that I think are garbage that I've talked about how I don't really trust the polls too much, but national polling in midterm elections has been pretty reliable. In 2020, likely in 2022, but also in 2018, in 2014, and 2010. And now a lot of people are saying, "Oh well, in 2014, the Republicans didn't take a lead till September. They surged in September." And yeah, that's true, but I don't the thing is, the 2014 comparisons are going to go out the window in 2-3 weeks here, right? Because for months, Republicans have been saying, "Oh, we're going to take the lead in September," because that's what happened in 2014. The thing with 2014 is that it was a low turnout midterm where the Democrats had no energy, and they didn't have a game changer like Dobbs. And so that is enough to, I think, make me say, okay, well, 2014 might have been in play a few months ago, but now we're in a different political universe. And so I think the Democrats are going to lead the generic ballot on election day. I don't know by how much. It could be more, could be by a slim amount as they're leading right now. But what I will say is that they clearly have the momentum. And you could also make the argument that nationally polls are underestimating Democrats, because in New York 19, we had 4 polls for that election. All of them had Mark Molinaro winning. He lost to Pat Ryan. We've had polls, I think, in Minnesota. In that special election, the poll had the Republicans winning by 14 or 15, and they only won by 4. And we had, I think, a Kansas abortion referendum poll where it showed the pro-life side winning by 4, but the pro-choice side won by 19. So this summer, Dems and pro-choice, essentially the same thing, have been defying expectations. They've been outperforming their polls, and I think in the midterms, that's not going to happen in some places, but I think in other places and nationally, when you look at where the momentum's headed, I think Democrats could outperform their polls nationally. Now, one more thing before we get into it, let's talk about Joe Biden's approval rating. Joe Biden currently sits at a 42.4% approval rating, which is still pretty bad. And I want to be clear about that. This is still not a good approval rating. Again, he's still not very popular. And again, if you compare him to Trump, well, Trump wasn't very popular either. On this day, Biden at 42.4, Trump was at 40.3. So again, Biden's a little more popular than Trump, but again, not by very much. Really not by very much. And if you compare Biden to Obama, he's at a few points behind him, and Bush at the time he's behind Bush. And if you compare him to Reagan, he's essentially where Reagan is, but he's well behind George H.W. Bush, and he's well behind these older presidents too. So again, presidents do become pretty unpopular, especially around this time. Ronald Reagan obviously famously was very unpopular, and then he won re-election by a landslide in 2 years later. So again, Biden's not historically unpopular, but he's still someone who is not super well liked. He still has over half the country disapproving of his job performance, and so for me, yeah, that's not great. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it has surged. His low point was last month. He was at just 37%. He's now up to 42.5%. So he's surged about 5%. And his net approval on that, his low point of 37.5, his net approval was like negative 19.7. Now it's what, negative 9.7. So he's made up 10% of ground, which is still a lot nationwide. So again, Biden's not popular, but he's making up ground, and he's gone from horribly unpopular to just generically unpopular. And for the Democrats, I think that that's okay. They don't need Biden to be popular because they haven't really, again, a lot of these Democratic candidates are really tying themselves to Biden. So, yeah, I certainly think that Biden doesn't need to be at 50% by election day, although, again, I think the Democrats would love that, but it's not very likely, and they don't need it. So, that being said, I know you guys are getting sick of me talking. Let's get into the predictions. So, our safe Democratic states, Washington, I've already cleared this one up. It could have been competitive early on, but the Republicans got smacked in that primary. It was an open primary, so not good for them. Oregon, California, Hawaii, the usuals. We know the drill by now. Blue states, red states, Idaho. I'll talk about some of these in a second. The Dakotas, Kansas, Nebraska, or Kansas, Oklahoma, both Oklahoma elections. Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, South Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana. And then I want to talk about a few of these states. So first of all, Indiana, there was an internal poll that came out yesterday that had the Republican Todd Young only up by 3, but it was sponsored by McDermott's campaign, and it's just that poll is just like, it's a real poll, but it's very, very inaccurate, and it's like they probably messed with it just to get the result they wanted to say. Oh, we're competitive, but in reality, they're going to lose by 15%. So Indiana's safe regardless of what that poll says. Missouri, obviously, that's safe now that Eric Greitens did not get the nomination. Iowa, we've gotten a few Seltzer polls that have shown Mike Franken within striking distance of Chuck Grassley. Seltzer's good at Iowa, so I don't, I'm not going to step in front of the bus, but I think that by September, later this month, by October, we're probably going to see Seltzer come out with a poll that shows Grassley up by a lot more than he was up by in the last poll. Finally, Alaska with Murkowski and Chewbacca, safe Republican. Utah, obviously, we have an independent Evan McMullen running against incumbent Republican Mike Lee. McMullen's probably going to do about as well as Biden, meaning that he'll probably lose by 20 points statewide. So this is, these are the races that are to some degree competitive. Let's get into it here with our likely Democratic states, starting with Colorado. There's been a lot of weird polling in Colorado. Joe O'Dea has gotten a lot of hype from the Republican, from the Republican base, although, again, he's still trailing in all these polls we've seen. Even Trafalgar, which is, again, a very Republican pollster, and they have been notoriously bad at underestimating Democrats in states like Colorado. They still show Michael Bennet up by 6. And when you look at McLaughlin, which is one of the most Republican-leaning polls along with Trafalgar, obviously, Bennet up by 8. So until we get a legitimate poll that shows O'Dea within striking distance of Bennet, I'm not going to believe the hype. And also, Colorado is a state where in 2020 Biden actually outran his polls by a substantial amount. So just going to put that out there, but before we get excited about Joe O'Dea potentially beating Michael Bennet. New Hampshire is next. New Hampshire is a state where I think the Republicans could have had a chance had they run a better candidate, but it looks like they're going to end up nominating Don Bolduc, who is, again, not very good, doesn't have a ton of money, and I think the Republicans are just going to pull out New Hampshire, not really invest there. So, yeah, New Hampshire, I think should be game over by mid-September, assuming Don Bolduc gets the nomination. And then, yeah, that's it. 47 Democratic seats, 45 Republicans. Let's go to our likely Republican states. For now, I only see 2, which are Ohio and Florida. These are the usuals. Again, you'll note, I'm not going to spoil it, but you'll note that there is a state that was likely last time that is no longer likely. So just to put that out there, maybe it's already caught your attention, but we won't be doing that yet. Florida, Rubio's going to win by 10 or 11. It's a state where he outran the top of the ticket by 9 or by 8% in 2016. He's going to outrun Trump for sure. He's going to get really good numbers with Hispanic voters in the South. He'll probably win Miami-Dade County. And yeah, I think Rubio's going to win by double digits when it's all said and done. So likely margin. Then finally, Ohio. Again, this is a state where the Republicans are having to pour a lot of money into it. Again, J.D. Vance has not been running a good campaign so far, but ultimately it's Ohio. And even though Tim Ryan holds a polling lead, it doesn't really mean too much to me. And again, all these polls you've been seeing that have shown Tim Ryan ahead, they've been Democratic internals or non-reputable polls. And the best polls in Ohio, generally Emerson is pretty good in Ohio. They advanced up by 3. Trafalgar advanced up by 5. I think Vance can win by probably 6 or 7 when it's all said and done. So 47-47, getting into the real battlegrounds here. Like, these are the states really that I think have a chance of going to either party right here. So let's sort of lean Democratic states first. So the first state there is Arizona. And Arizona is a state that I was originally very, very bullish on the Republicans. And I say that because I expected Democratic turnout with Hispanics to fall off. I expected a lot of reversion in the Maricopa County suburbs. And I expected Mark Kelly to just kind of, not have enough appeal to, to the Blake, or to defeat someone like Blake Masters, who, again, I originally thought wouldn't be as bad of a candidate because he didn't, unlike a Dr. Oz or a Herschel Walker, didn't really have any bad gaffes or moments. However, he's been getting hammered for his positions on abortion and wanting to privatize Social Security, which are big issues to the voters of Arizona. And Arizona is a state where I think 40 to 45% of Trump's voters in 2020 supported keeping abortion legal in all or most cases, which is disastrous because Masters cannot afford to lose any of those voters. And if Kelly does even 10% better with pro-choice voters in Arizona, which is possible because it's, the year after Dobbs is decided, it's game over for Blake Masters. So again, Kelly has I'll show you the polls right now. They're just really lopsided in favor of Mark Kelly. And yeah, there's time for Blake Masters to close the gap. But right now, not looking too good for him. Again, he's down by 8%. So again, the fact that, Trafalgar did these polls, they showed Kelly up by 3. Even America Next and even these Republican internal polls, they've had Kelly up. So until Masters can even just find a lead in any of these polls, I will not, really be too willing to bet against him or too willing to bet for Blake Masters. And so Mark Kelly has right now favored to win by, I think, 3 to 4%, probably outrunning his 2020 margin just because Arizona is a super pro-choice state. Now, next lean Democratic state, that would be Georgia. Georgia is a state where I think we're going to see a runoff here again. So if that gives you flashbacks to last year, me too, I guess. But the runoff, ironically, was created to suppress, the black vote. Is I think going to re-elect the first black senator from Georgia, obviously Raphael Warnock. And I say that because Raphael Warnock, like if this race were only, it was just, whoever gets the most votes on election day wins automatically. Probably be a toss-up. However, the runoff creates a safety net for Democrats. Herschel Walker needs to get 50% of the vote on election day for him to win realistically. And the issue is, for him, I don't think he has a path for that because he's a bad candidate. He will do really poorly. I think he'll run behind Trump in a lot of the suburbs of Atlanta because, again, he has allegations of domestic abuse. He fathered children that with other women who weren't his wife. He's not a great speaker either. And I know people attack John Fetterman for that, and I think you can make that argument. But the thing is, Walker's worse because he won't even debate Warnock. I think Fetterman's going to debate Oz eventually, just not, now. And so ultimately, I don't see a path for Herschel Walker to get 50% on election day. I just don't. I think he can get to 49%, but with a libertarian candidate running in this race, with, him having to get, really good numbers out of the Atlanta suburbs on election day to get to 50%, I don't see it. He can win, but he's definitely an underdog right now. And again, the fact that even, and like look at these polls that have showed the race narrowing, like I just want to talk about them because I think they're garbage. So first of all, Warnock's up by 2% right now. And again, this is within the margin of error for Democrats in Georgia. I just want to say that. Raphael Warnock is leading by 1.7 in a state where the polls overestimated Biden by 0.7%. So if you add that to, if you subtract that from Warnock's lead, he's still going to win by a point either way. And secondly, polls that have had him down, Phillips Academy, which is a high school, obviously. I didn't look too much into their poll. I think they oversampled white voters by a fair bit, but again, not an awful poll. I don't really have too many thoughts on it. What I will say is that Trafalgar, which again is a Republican pollster, they had a decent sample, but they don't, I think that mathematically they probably had Warnock doing a lot worse with black voters than he actually would be doing. And additionally, they have him, only trailing by 1, and this is the poll that had Trump winning Georgia by 4. So if Walker's only up by 1 where they had Trump winning by 4, not great for him. And Trafalgar's just a Republican-leaning poll in general. Like, they had Trump winning Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, Michigan, Pennsylvania, so they weren't great in 2020. And then Emerson, which I like, generally I don't mind Emerson. I think they're a fine poll, but the poll they did had Warnock winning black voters by just 40%. And in 2021, he won them by 80%. And that is and my good friend Evan Scrimshaw did the math on this, so go follow him on Twitter @Scrimshaw, because I'm quoting him here. That is a 12% error statewide, because again, if black voters would be 30% of the electorate in 2022, if that's like, the error there would be 40%, because he won 80%. He won them by 80% in 2021. They have been winning it by only 40%. That's 12% statewide. So if you adjust for that only, Warnock would be up by 10 points, which, like, I don't think he'll win by 10. But again, this is all to say, all these polls that have shown him in losing or closing the gap, I don't really believe them. So ultimately, I think it goes to a runoff, and I think Warnock wins by 2 or 3% on runoff day. Now, let's talk about our leading Republican states. I only see 2 right now. Those are the states of Wisconsin and North Carolina, which, again, evening it up, 49-49. The thing with Wisconsin is that the polls there are just really, really weird. Because in 2020, they had Biden winning the state by like 7. He only won by a point or so. And I'm very skeptical of polls in Wisconsin in general. But it's interesting because, the polls have shown a lot of tightening here. And, Mandela Barnes, even in Trafalgar, which, again, is, a poll that, their final poll, Wisconsin only underestimated Biden by like 0.2%, so it wasn't awful. But they have Barnes up by 2, nearing 50%. And these other polls, Beacon and Marquette, they have Barnes at or beyond 50%. So clearly he's doing pretty well right now. But again, polls in Wisconsin are very, very suspect. And again, if you add all these polls up, it's 13 divided by 3 is, about a 4 point something percent lead. I don't think it's a big enough lead for Mandela Barnes, because again, if you say he's up by 4.5 right now, Biden was up by 7, he only won by a point. So Johnson's still within the Republican margin of error, though I will say in 2018 and 2014, the polls in Wisconsin were pretty accurate. So midterm, hopefully for for Mandela Barnes, the midterm polls in Wisconsin are better, but if not, I still think Ron John's favored. And I'm just, betting on the polls is really hard to do, and I think Ron John wins by 2 as of right now. Again, gap could close. Barnes could be favored by election day, but also Ron John could, start campaigning, start to actually, really win this Senate seat and take control and tighten the polling gap. We don't know which way it's going to go. It's just a really hard state to predict, and for now, I'm going to stick with the incumbent. Now, North Carolina. This is a state where I think that the Democrats are running a very good campaign, but it's flying under the radar, which I think is good for them, because again, nationally, North Carolina is a more Republican state. Again, I think the average North Carolinian would prefer Republicans over Democrats. But when you have local races, Democrats do quite well. They won the Attorney General race, they won the governor's race, they won the Secretary of State race, and in 2008, they won a Senate race there. So Democrats can win North Carolina, and they can do it, by running more issue-based, localized campaigns with good candidates. That's what Sherry Beasley's doing. And so when you look at the most recent polling data we've gotten here, I think she has a lead, actually, as of right now. Go to North Carolina. I think she's up by she had a lead. Oh, she's trailing now. Interesting, because maybe I think they adjusted PPP to give Bud the lead, because they came out with a poll today that had Beasley up by 1. They probably adjusted it. So Bud retook the lead, but it's essentially a dead heat, really. And the thing with Sherry Beasley is that she's a good candidate. She's doing pretty well in the polls. She's tied in these Republican internals. She's actually ahead in the nonpartisan polls. So again, from a polling standpoint, you could say she's favored, but again, it really comes down to black turnout. If she can, get that black share of the electorate to go up by a couple points, she can probably win. If she can't, and if black turnout falls like it does normal midterm, she's going to lose by 5 or 6%. So, again, the Dobbs decision gives Democrats a lot of energy and momentum, but will it be enough? We don't know. For now, I'm going to say she runs a good campaign, but loses by 3%. Well, I could see her winning. I could see her pulling it off, but I also could see it, the gap widening in favor of Ted Budd. So, again, I think this is one of the races where I think we'll have a good idea by, election day because of early vote data. And yeah, so Nevada and Pennsylvania, these states are really hard. And the thing is, these are toss-up states. And generally speaking, toss-up states, both, all of them go one way. So in 2020, the toss-ups were like, North Carolina, Maine, Georgia, Montana, Iowa. Those are the toss-up Senate races. And all of them, except for Georgia, voted for the Republicans. But on election day, Georgia actually did vote for Purdue. He just didn't get 50%. We all know how that turned out. So I think betting on toss-ups to split is just not really reliable, because again, generally toss-ups will go whichever way the wind blows, and generally if the wind takes one, it'll take the others. So I think as of right now, the Democrats have the momentum, and thus I'm going to give them both these toss-up races. Again, very, very close here, but I think they're both tilting Democratic right now. So with Nevada is really a game of, can Democrats get good Hispanic turnout? And from what I've been hearing, I think they're going to do a pretty good job. Cortez Masto is a good incumbent. She has a lot more money than Adam Laxalt. She can do a lot better turnout operations. And the thing is, in 2020, Biden still won Nevada by 2.5, despite the fact he didn't really care about the state, didn't really try to turn out as many voters as he could. And I think he could have won it by a lot more had he actually done a better job. Additionally, the Vegas economy is going to be much more alive than it was in pandemic 2020. That helps Democrats. It brings back more workers to the city, more younger, working class, middle income voters, helping Cortez Masto. And finally, the suburbs are going to continue to trend to the left, albeit maybe a little, maybe a little slower, but I think they're continue to trend left, compared to 2016, 2018, 2020, because of this Dobbs decision. Prior to Dobbs, I could have seen some reversion, but now I think it just gets harder for the Republicans. And Adam Laxalt's a fine candidate, but he doesn't have enough money. He doesn't have, I think, enough charisma to beat Cortez Masto as of right now. Very close. I think it's going to be within a point, but again, Cortez Masto is the favorite in my book as of right now. And also the Nevada Democrats are very good at what they do. It's always wise to bet on the Nevada Democrats. So, yeah. Pennsylvania, it's just been so interesting because it's just, been the most coveted Senate race all year. Let's look at the polls here. So, again, Pennsylvania, the polls in 2020 weren't amazing. They had, just so you guys know, they had Joe Biden up by 3.5. He won by about a point. So, again, they weren't great, but they also weren't, they didn't miss horribly like Ohio or Wisconsin. And as of right now, Fetterman's up by 8.1. And, no matter how much shifting towards the Republicans you do, he's still outside the margin of error. And so, yeah, Oz has, been gaining a little bit of momentum as of late. I think Fetterman has kind of hit his peak, maybe. I mean, I don't think he's going to, have a, go downwards a ton or, free fall, but I think he's kind of hit his peak. And the thing is, the polls that, had him winning by a ton, Pittsburgh was together, had him up by 18. This poll had him up by 14, 16, 17, 11. All these massive leads just seem very they just seem kind of unrealistic. And so we're getting more realistic polls. Trafalgar had him up by 5, and this poll had Trump winning Pennsylvania, so that's not good for Oz. Emerson had him up by 5, Susquehanna had him up by 5, and I think this is a more reasonable expectation of where we are right now. And so polls are narrowing up a little bit, but again, Fetterman still has a commanding lead over Dr. Oz. So, yeah, as of right now, I think he's favored to win, but I think it'll narrow up by election day, and ultimately it's going to be very close. So, yeah, that's my prediction as of today, guys. 51 seats for the Democrats, them netting a seat, Republicans at 49, but again, going to be very, very close here. So, thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you all next one. Bye, guys.